Hi, how's it going? I'm going to do a quick intro to Beckhoff PLCs and TwinCAT 3. Kind of just from a file new standpoint, where do you get started? I know it can be kind of intimidating, especially with PC-based systems rather than hardware-based PLCs. Um, a lot of times it's kind of a foreign world, and there's a lot more going on. But it's really not that bad. I'll go ahead and walk you through it. So start things off. I'm just going to open up TwinCAT. So go in here to the Beckhoff folder, TwinCAT XAE 2013. We get our start page here. Two ways to create a new project. You can click on New Project, or you can go File, New Project. You also do Control Shift N, and I clicked the wrong thing. That's not going to work. Just click New Project here. We got a few different options here. This is really the one you want, TwinCAT XAE project, XML format. You can create your own templates if you want, but if you're just installing TwinCAT, just use the out-of-the-box one. Don't use the TwinCAT PLC project. I know intuitively you would think that's what you want. In reality, this project contains a PLC project, or you need this project so that the PLC has a place to live. There's a lot more going on with Beckhoff controls and TwinCAT than just a PLC. There's motion control, I/O, scoping, all that crazy stuff. We've got some scope projects here. Speaking of that, this is mainly I use this mostly for tuning servo motors and watching signals that are really too fast to just watch online when you go online with a PLC. It's really handy for that. We've got some other project types here. I think it's just a blank solution. Um, so I'm going to go ahead and create one here. So under TwinCAT projects, it's the TwinCAT XAE. We've got a test program folder created. I'm just going to call the project test program. Obviously, you probably wouldn't have a folder created ahead of time. I actually tried this beforehand and I ended up having some networking problems. I added some more drops to my network and ripped out one of the drops to my machine here, so I couldn't talk to it. So this is take two. Um, anyway, hit OK, and we'll create the project, and it'll create all the folders and files that it needs here to run the project. So I can get that freaking thing out of my window. There we go. So it comes up here, and we've got a few different windows here that we really should probably know about. This is Visual Studio. It's probably one of the more supported IDEs. I know there's Eclipse also. There's Codesys. There's a lot of IDEs, but um, in this case, Beckhoff's chosen to work with Microsoft and integrate TwinCAT 3 into Visual Studio. Um, it's really pretty nice compared to TwinCAT 2, I think. They made a lot of improvements. Not that they couldn't have made those improvements to TwinCAT 2, but just everything being all integrated in the same software package is really sweet. It used to be kind of broken up into all these different programs that you had to work with. So anyway, over here on our project tree, we've got a few different chunks over here. We've got system, motion, PLC, safety, C++, and I/O. For the most part, especially in this video, I'm just going to be looking at system, PLC, and I/O. I'm not going to be really paying any attention to this other stuff yet. Those each deserve their own series of videos probably, but just to kind of get things started here, we'll just focus on that. So first thing we want to do is we want to connect up to our PLC, right? Um, I know a lot of people on YouTube, they have TwinCAT 3 installed, and they just run it locally on their system. Well, that's great for testing and learning. It's not so great if you have a real machine that you want to run. You don't want to have your laptop hooked up to it all the time to run the machine. So you want to connect up to PLC. I've already got a route created for this. I'm going to go ahead and go through the exercise of finding one though. So we come up to this drop-down menu here and click Choose Target System. Now here again, it shows that I've already got it created. I'm just going to ignore it, treat it as if I don't have it. So we click Search Ethernet button down here, and the first thing you want to do is hit Broadcast Search. It's going to come up with a list of network adapters. I have If you only have one network adapter, I think it'll just use the one that it has access to. I very frequently have more than one network adapter. It's pretty rare that I only have one. So in my case, my real network adapter, these are for VMs. My real network adapters, this Intel dual band wireless, just hit OK. If you don't uncheck those boxes, it will search those adapters too, so it'll send out a broadcast and try to find any Beckhoff TwinCAT PLCs running. And it looks like it found it. This little X here says we're already connected. Here again, I'm just going to kind of ignore it. I'll go through some of the settings down here. Target name or target route name. This really doesn't need to be changed. This shouldn't need to be changed, at least not yet. A lot of this stuff you should be able to leave it alone. In some cases, you may need to change this to IP address rather than host name. I prefer host name. That way, if your IP address does change, it should still find it, even though you usually have to come in here and do a broadcast search again. Hostname just works a little bit better. Like, for example, at work, I have two network adapters. I have one that I use at my desk, and then I have one that is in my bag that I take with me out to the floor. And if you use hostname, it'll automatically switch between those two adapters. If you go off of IP address, you have to come in here and do a broadcast search and recreate the route each time you switch adapters. So hostname is a little bit better if it works. If not, use IP address. This stuff over here, this is kind of where the route gets saved to, sort of. I just leave them both at static. You really only need to worry about it if you're doing more advanced stuff, like if you're trying to hook up an HMI to the PLC. You need to come in here and create a route for it. So we'll go ahead and hit OK. Actually, if we were to not be connected to this, let me go ahead and delete that, actually, just to kind of show what goes on. Come in here, remove this route. Okay, so now we have no route. Come in here, search Ethernet, broadcast search, uncheck those two, OK. And we wait a couple of minutes here. Our PLC comes up, all the settings are the same. We can click Add Route, and it'll come up here and ask us for a password. The default username is administrator, spelled out, and the password is the number 1. This can be either checked or unchecked. I just leave it as whatever it came up with. It just kind of depends on how the person that set up the PLC did it. If this is your first time setting up the PLC, just don't worry about it. Just leave that box alone. And should have added the route. It may not have. If we click refresh status here, there we go. So now we can see we're connected. We've got our little X there. We can close out. And come back to our choose target window here. We can double click on that or select it and hit OK. Now we are connected up to this PLC. So the first thing you're going to want to do is I come in here to the real-time tab, double click on that heading. This is the CPU configuration. So this is one of the things that's really kind of fundamentally different with Beckhoff versus a lot of hardware PLCs. With TwinCAT, you have, and TwinCAT 3 specifically, this is new to TwinCAT 3, TwinCAT 2 didn't have it. You can come in here and very specifically control what CPUs are doing what. So my target PC is Beckhoff CX5130. It is a 2-core, I believe. Yes, it's a 2-core. So if we come in here and we click read from target, we need to have this checked, or this in our window here. Come in here and click read from target, and it'll tell you how many cores that PC has and what is available to you to use. Excuse me. So we can just leave these for now, but you kind of want to be aware of it. One thing that I really like to do is I like to isolate the core that my PLC is running on from Windows. So what you can do here is you can come in here, click set on target, and you can change the number of cores that Windows will use to run Windows. And so now if I set this to 1 and click set, it would set that PLC so that Windows can only use the first, or core 0, and core 1 is reserved purely for TwinCAT only. That's kind of nice because you can push your you can push your PLC a little bit harder. Rather than trying to stay below 50%, you can maybe go a little bit higher to 60 or 70% even. It's getting kind of risky when you get that high, but that's one thing that you can do to kind of push things a little bit. I'm just going to leave it as is for now. This should work just fine for what we're doing. We shouldn't really need to mess with it. We can come in here and we have nothing really running at all. So these are going to be zeros. This is just kind of an online view of how hard the system's working. And here we've got a list of priorities. Again, it's all blank. We've only got one task, and that task isn't doing anything. So we're going to go ahead and just call that good. Like I said, we came in, read from target, and that's really all we need to do. So now we need to set these settings on our PC or PLC and get this program in there just to kind of, get things working, make sure that we have licenses, all that stuff. So I'm going to click Activate Configuration. It's the little building block button up here. It'll come up with a box making sure that you want to do that. Click OK. And now it'll ask you if you want to restart TwinCAT system in run mode. Just click OK. And we wait a couple of minutes here, and we can see we got our little status indicator back. Alright, so now what we need to do is we need to create a PLC project. So we got this tab here, but there's nothing here. We can't do anything with it. There's no information. So we're going to create a new PLC project. We're going to right-click Add New Item. And you want a standard PLC project. You don't want an empty one unless you really want an empty one. I do this all the time with real machines. I do it professionally, and I do just standard PLC project. I don't bother creating my own empty one. A lot of times I actually excuse me. A lot of times I actually use templates instead, but like I say, standard PLC project is what you want to use. You're starting from scratch. So I'm just going to call this main. Okay, I had to get a glass of water there. So we created our main PLC project here. Now we can open this up and start writing code. So take just a second here. We can expand this out. We've got our main project and our main instance. I wouldn't really worry about that main instance too much. It comes up here with a task created. So this is another thing that's kind of different with Beckhoff and TwinCAT. The way that it handles tasks is a little bit different than Rockwell or Automation Direct. I'm not sure about Omron. It's been a long time. Been a really long time. So with Beckhoff, or let me start out with most PLCs, most hardware-based PLCs. Actually, I don't even know if I should say most. With a lot of them, you come in here to your task, and there's just like a continuous checkbox, and by default that's checked. And what that does is that just runs the CPU at 100%, running the PLC program all the time, and as soon as it gets done scanning the PLC program, it immediately starts again, just in a continuous loop. TwinCAT is a little bit different. It's much more deterministic, and that can be a good and a bad thing. It's mainly, I would say, a good thing. It's really nice to know exactly what your scan time is going to be rather than just guessing. And, hey, the scan hits whenever it hits kind of thing. So we can double click on this PLC task up here that it created, and we can set our scan time. So in this case, 10 milliseconds is going to be just fine. You can go all the way down to 1 millisecond scan rate, which is how often the PLC reads the program and works with it. If you want to go faster than that, you can. What you have to do is you have to come into the real-time tab, and you have to change your base time on that CPU that task is running on. So I can change it all the way down to 50 microseconds if I want. And let me come back in here to our task, and we can see that now we're running this PLC program every 200 cycle ticks, and that is equal to a 10 millisecond program. If I want, I can set that all the way down to 1 cycle tick, and it'll run this thing every 50 microseconds. And I can tell you from experience, it will do it. It doesn't have any trouble doing that every 50 microseconds. You want your program to be very short and sweet. it's working pretty hard at that point. So let's go back to a little bit more realistic scan time. Let's just set it at a millisecond. That should be plenty for anything we do here. Usually I shoot for a millisecond at work. That works for most stuff. There are instances where you may need to go faster, but this should be just fine. So we're going to call that good. We really don't need to worry about any of this other stuff in here. We can see our online tab, it's all zeros because we haven't put this program in the PLC yet. This is all just kind of blank. We really don't need to mess with it. Hit exit. And so now we can come back in here to our PLC. I'll just contract that system down. We really don't need to look at it. And we've got all these folders over here that were created for us. So we have DUTs, GVLs, POUs, and VISUs. Each of these is important, and I actually like to add another one here when I come in here. That's FBs, and not under DUTs, just in addition to. So I like to have all these folders over here. There's really no need. You can put stuff wherever you want in Beckhoff. A lot of other PLC platforms, you're required to put user-defined data types in a user-defined data type section. Beckhoff doesn't work that way. You can put a UDT right next to a program in the tree, and it handles it just fine. So if we were to come in here to our so DUTs, I'll just go over what these are. DUTs is I think definable user types or something. I'm not really sure. It's like a structure or a user-defined data type is what that's intended to be for. FBs is function blocks. I will get into them in later videos, but I like to add them in here. I use function blocks all over the place. It saves a ton of time when you're commissioning a machine, and you have a lot fewer bugs when you reuse code with function blocks. GVLs is global variables or global vals. So in here we can create global variable lists. That's actually what that stands for, global variable list. It's like a global tag list in other PLC platforms. I try not to use them too much. I prefer to have my tags be local where possible, kind of. And there again, I'll get into some of my my preferred personal programming methods. But so if you want global variables, that's where you would put them. POUs is program organizational units, I believe, is what that stands for. This is where your programs go. So all your programs and the subroutines under them, and that's where your machine code goes. Visualizations, that's like Beckhoff's kind of version of an HMI. I don't use them very often. Usually we have a dedicated HMI at work when I build a machine, where it's like a hardware based, like a Proface or some other similar kind of concept. We have used Beckhoff visualizations mainly to have like a dashboard inside the PLC program. So when you're troubleshooting, you can kind of see what's going on and have a little bit kind of a nice way to look at it like an HMI, but have a little bit more access than you want to give the operators. So that's mainly what we use it for. A lot of people do use this for the actual HMI, and it works great for that. And here we've got our PLC task. It's linked to this task up here. They're the same thing. So if we expand this out, we can see we've got this main under here. And well, what the heck is that? Well, you can come in here, right-click Add Existing Item. This is where we add our POUs. So by default, it puts this main POU in here, which is under POUs. So if we come in here to main, we can see it. This is a structured text POU. It comes up with this by default. So let's just do a quick structured text program. I'll keep it really brief. Let's do like a counter. So let's create a test integer here. Let's call it a dent. And comment everything. Always, always, always put a comment next to everything, even if you're going to delete it in 10 seconds. Let's call it testing counter. So we got a variable here, and I'm just going to write a quick thing to count up every scan. So test int is set equal to test int plus 1 semicolon, and then I'm going to do an if test int is greater than or equal to 1000, then test int is set equal to 0. And I'm going to do a save all up here, and then I'm going to do another activate. Normally you could just log in with this, but we changed some stuff over here and created tasks, so this would be a good time to activate. Current PLC project settings require at least target version 3142.22. Okay, that's fine. I have an older version of TwinCAT installed on the PLC than I do on my engineering laptop here, so alrighty, we should be running. So now if we click login, that's okay. That's okay. Just click login again. Nope. Why isn't it happy? Let's try to activate one more time here. Yes. Let's see if it throws that error again. It may have aborted the activation because of that message box that came up earlier. There we go. Let's try it now. There we go. Application port 851 does not exist. So this is telling us that basically we don't have a PLC program. Do you want to create it? And we click yes. And download here. Well, what the heck? You know, our counter's not counting up. We need to tell it to run. It doesn't run by default when you create a new program. You need to tell it to do that. Beckhoff is very don't, you know, like you don't want the machine to start up randomly the first time you download to it. So we click run here, and we're still not counting up. So what the heck is going on? So we should be running, but we're not counting up. Why are we not counting up? This is why I always like to do a kind of a hello world program here. Like I said, I really don't. I don't do this very often, where I start completely from scratch. I'm usually starting from a template, so a lot of this stuff is done for me. Let's go through here. You know, I think I ran into this the other day, and the solution was to delete the task and create a new one. I'm going to go ahead and try that. So what we're going to do here is right-click, delete, yes, and we're going to come up here also, right-click, remove, okay. And then we'll come in here to our main project and right-click on that, add reference task. And we're going to just go ahead and give it a new one here. So we'll call this main task, create new task, open. And now we're going to right click, add existing item, main. And we'll try to activate that. Let me just check this. Yeah, that looks alright. Auto starts checked. Okay. Activate. Restart in run mode. It may ask me if I want to activate the boot project at some point. It may not, because I checked this box over here in one of these guys. Anyway, there was a checkbox over here somewhere about a boot project. I checked it, so when the PLC restarts, it'll start this project automatically. Let's go ahead and log in. There we go. So must have been something funky about that task. I'm not really sure why it wasn't working, but if it doesn't for you, then like I said, this is the second time that's happened to me where I can delete the task and create a new one, and it'll work fine. So there must be some setting that isn't set correctly by default. So we can see our counter here is counting up. So we got our equivalent of a hello world going in the PLC. The program's running, all that's all good. So that's pretty much it. That's how you go from file, new project, all the way through connecting up to a PLC and getting a hello world program to run. Have a fun time programming.